I'd like to talk today about body image and conversations around body image in an educational setting. So maybe this is a little bit of a niche topic. For me, it's very relevant because I work at an outdoor education center where we frequently work with kids doing physical activities with kids who may or may not necessarily be physically inclined because we're working with public school kids, private school kids, and whatever group of kids, but they're not coming to camp specifically because of interest in physical activities or prior ability with physical activities. So we get all sorts of kids, and then we put physical activities in front of them and ask them to try their best with them. And inevitably, obviously, um, issues of body image come up because we're asking them to do something that might be difficult for them. We're asking them to do something as part of a group with kids who are at all sorts of different levels of ability and physical fitness. And so that desire to compare, whether it's intentional or whether it just kind of comes about naturally, organically in the process, is there. And also, when you're doing an activity as a group and a bunch of kids are trying to figure out, who should go next, it's an activity that involves lifting or helping. Um, and people are either going to notice their own size or they're going to notice the size of other students. And that is probably going to get spoken about unless you address it ahead of time. And you're probably thinking right now that my take is going to be here's how you address that ahead of time. And that's not really where I'm going to go with this. That's where a lot of my coworkers and my supervisors would go with this. I have a different perspective than my direct supervisor here at this camp, and that's okay. I'm not the authority here. I am an employee at the camp, but on my YouTube channel, I am the authority. So I get to say what I think, and I feel like this is kind of important. Um, there's a whole lot of things going on here. Kids people are aware of how their body looks in comparison to that of others in general terms. We cannot take away basic facts of appearance, of weight, of size. We cannot take those things away by not talking about them. And I want to back up for a minute here. I was going to say something at the beginning because as you're looking at me, you might think, hey, this looks like a relatively fit guy. What's his right to even talk about this for some of us who have challenges with our body image? Being a larger person is not the only body image that anybody could struggle with. And as a guy, you are probably just as likely, if not more likely, to struggle with body image as a smaller person. Do you know what the average height of a man in the United States is? I don't either. Um, but I do know that the threshold for a lot of women is 6 foot or above. It's kind of a magic number. I mean, if we didn't count in inches and 12 of them equals a foot, and we counted in meters, it would be something else. But 6 foot's a convenient number. I'm 5'4". Um, I'm in the excellent company of Martin Luther King Jr., Robin Williams, Ben Stiller, to name three off the top of my head. Did you know that those individuals were 5'4"? Gandhi probably was too, if that. Did you know that those individuals were 5'4"? If you yourself are not significantly noticeably shorter than average as a male, you probably did not know that fact. There's a reason I know that fact. Um, it's because I took note when I read, in passing that those individuals were 5'4". I was like, oh, same height as me. Ben Stiller. I mean, Martin Luther King Jr., more of a cultural and social and worldwide impact, of course, than Ben Stiller. But depending on what you're looking for, you're like, okay, I can be an influential person. I can be a good person. I can be a successful person. I obviously latched on to this trivia more than most people would, because that's an area of self-doubt for me. I knew that I was shorter than others, going back sixth grade or so, at least. Even fifth grade, I was a smaller kid than most others in my grade. And that was something that I was going to be aware of, whether somebody talked about it or not. And I wanted to make this kind of personal to me, so I'm not just sharing random BS off the top of my head as someone who has no personal experience with that kind of issue. And I have a lot of personal experience in leading groups of kids too, and I take a different approach than we're not going to talk about size, we're not going to talk about weight, we're not going to talk about body image, I don't want to hear a single thing about any person. That's not my approach. And that's not because I don't care. It's not because I'm insensitive. It's because I have beliefs that I've thought about a lot, and experiences not only with my own journey, but also with watching how kids react and respond, both how they interact and respond without guidance from an adult, and how they interact and respond with a different type of guidance than me kind of trying to shut down that type of communication or that subject matter. People who, no matter how you look, I mean, almost everybody, there's a few people out there who are gifted with every single desirable physical characteristic, have beautiful hair, beautiful eyes, perfect figure, everything, but they're in the minority. And who am I to say that just because I look at somebody and think, wow, you're tall, you're strong, you have everything that I think a person would feel is attractive about themselves, that doesn't mean that that person doesn't struggle with some sort of image issue. But everybody's aware of how they look. Sometimes people have body dysmorphia, which means that your perception of yourself isn't really the same as other people's perception of you, and maybe your perception of yourself isn't really realistic to how you actually are. But everybody has some sort of perception in their own mind about how they look and how they feel about that. Now, I know as a kid, up until as a young adult even, and up until the point where I just really became oblivious to my appearance most of the time, and every once in a while I'm next to a really tall person, I'm like, notice again that I'm not tall and am short. But it was more embarrassing to me if we're kids, we're talking about stuff, somebody brings up height, it's maybe slightly embarrassing to me. But if an adult is like, hey, don't say that, and I know that I'm the person they're talking about or referring to, or maybe I wasn't even the person they're referring to, but that adult thought I was, so now they're calling attention to this thing that I'm self-conscious about, by trying to shut it down. And now I'm embarrassed because an adult had to get involved or thought they had to get involved. I'm embarrassed because now I am the object of the adult's unwanted attention in this situation, that's calling attention to, again, the thing I'm self-conscious about, through the means of trying to shut it down. And now the energy of the group has gone from like fun, natural, organic, kids talking, saying what kids say, to this tension. And because the adult is now correcting people, um, correcting my friends, correcting the people I want to be friends with, the people I want to think I'm cool, um, even if it's by embracing this joke or whatever they've made, or comment or remark or whatever about my size. Um, hey, I want group acceptance. Kids want to be accepted by the group, so we're kind of cool. We're kind of chill. Kids are chill about things most of the time, as long as it's not intended in a mean or hurtful way. And I think that's a different thing to manage than like the words themselves, the content, the subject itself. Um, but I'm willing to go with that joke or whatever it is. Um, and now an adult is correcting everybody. Everyone feels uncomfortable, and they feel uncomfortable. Why? Because of me. Not really because of me, but because of how the adult felt that they needed to respond to the situation involving me. Now I'm more self-conscious. I'm more embarrassed. Um, and this has gone from this like normal, natural, organic interaction between kids to this tense, unwanted, embarrassing interaction involving an adult correcting people on my behalf. So I know that for me personally, I want that far less than just for some acknowledgement about my size. Oh, Jimmy's small. He'd be easy to lift over this wall. Yeah, let's do it. All right, I get to be the hero. Cool. Yeah, I'm gonna impress everybody when I do go over the wall easily. But and then the adult like changes the whole energy and dynamic. It's like, hey, don't call him that. Um, and I have seen not necessarily the same thing in kids, but you can tell. I mean, when a kid kind of shuts down and gets really quiet, and you're like, whew, I saved them from so much embarrassment. No, they're like inwardly embarrassed. And the fact is, that kid who is bigger than other kids, they know it. It's on their mind. They might be very self-conscious about it. And I have feelings about it. And I've seen so many times where a camp counselor or instructor will shut down the conversations that child might want to have with their classmates. Um, because carrying that self-consciousness inside and not feeling able to express it, or to even bring it up, or to know how to bring it up, and to feel like, everyone's thinking this about me. I know everyone's thinking this about me, but I can't bring it up. And maybe because of the way that the adult has set the tone um, in that setting or activity, I'm not even allowed to talk about it. I'm going to get in trouble if I talk about my own body image, my own size, because that's been set as a boundary, as a no-no, as something you can't do, because we're afraid that people will be embarrassed if we talk about it. But we're all thinking it. We all know. We all have eyes. We can see. We have brains. We can think. We notice things. Kids do too. I think it's very, very unhelpful. And I respect the intention of my coworkers, my supervisor, everybody else who has a different perspective on this than I do. But I feel very strongly about this, because when kids are allowed to express how they're feeling about something, especially in a self-image, it can be such a positive conversation. Kids, in my experience, and I've worked with kids for a long time, kids are very empathetic when there's a sincere conversation. Often they resort to jokes and maybe jabs and even put downs, maybe because adults have taken that ability to have a sincere conversation away from them, or at least not guided them into it, because our guidance tends to be don't. don't say this, don't talk about this, don't bring this up, don't make this person feel that way, don't. Maybe they wouldn't naturally gravitate towards this honest, sincere, genuine conversation without guidance, but they certainly won't if we guide them the opposite way. When we guide them into a conversation, and I admit this is a delicate thing, this is a nuanced thing, it's a balanced thing, it takes practice, it takes experience, it takes observation and listening and attentiveness and willingness to kind of feel out that conversation. But when you can guide students through a conversation and allow them space and time with the right tone being set by the adult, the right modeling of how we approach this conversation being set by the adult, I've seen kids get to talk about these things that make them feel insecure about themselves and talk about it in front of the group. Open up, all eyes on, this shy kid who will not talk about anything because maybe they're just facing this continuous self-consciousness. They don't want eyes on them. They don't want to respond to any question at all because everyone's going to look at them and they feel a certain way about themselves. And then you bring it up directly in just the right way and give that kid an opportunity to share how they feel, how they felt in that activity, what they were afraid of. I was afraid to do this activity because I was afraid that I was too heavy. And you see all of the other kids listen without judgment and with empathy and make that child feel better about themselves. And now it's not something that they're just carrying around in their head all the time. It's something that they've been able to express, to say out loud, and breathe a huge sigh of relief afterwards because oh, that wasn't that bad. Wow, everyone listened. Everyone heard how I felt. And maybe now I don't even feel that way anymore. I feel understood. I was going through life thinking everyone's thinking this about me. Everyone's judging me. And now I feel understood. I feel cared about. I feel like all of my classmates see me and they still like me. And actually I feel closer to them now. That's the kind of experience that I've seen happen over and over and over again when instead of trying to shut down these things and also when you shut it down, you're telling kids, you're affirming to them that this is bad. We can't talk about weight. Oh, weight must be bad. If we're not allowed to talk about it because it's going to make someone feel awful, then it must really be bad. It must be terrible. It's so bad that I'm not allowed to talk about it. And it's not. It's just the reality for that child at that time, that person at that time. And we all know it's the reality, so we might as well be able to talk about it. Express how it makes us feel heard, feel understood. I hope that you can see as you're listening why this is important to me. It's so empowering to students to be in this space that is safe because an adult has made it safe, not by shutting stuff down, but by opening it up in the right way. By managing the conversations instead of preventing the conversations. And sometimes more management is needed than other times. Sometimes almost no management is all. Sometimes it's just asking the question. The kid shares, everyone listens, we're all good. We move on, but actually everybody feels a little bit better afterwards. Maybe someone does have, a medical condition and they want to be able to share that. Maybe they don't. I don't know. But when people share sincerely, kids recognize sincerity. And kids are empathetic. If someone pretends that they don't feel self-conscious, then, people, and this is not right, it's not good, it shouldn't happen, but people will poke at that self-consciousness, that thing that they should, or they think they should be self-conscious about. They'll bring it up. They'll be mean. But when you flip that around and that person has the chance to share sincerely in their own words, in their own way, um, about it, then everyone listens. Because now you're telling me that you are heavier than the rest of us. I don't need to tell you anymore. I never should have told you. It's especially not in a mean or hurtful way. I never should have. And kids shouldn't, do that. But when the other kid tells them, now that just took away that impulse, because now they've said it. There's no need, there's no reason, there's no motivation for the other kid to say it, because the kid that it actually pertained to said it. And they said how they felt about it. And that human impulse towards empathy and understanding kicks in that setting, in that situation. And I've seen it over and over and over again. Outside of that, I don't know how much I even want to go. I feel like I expressed that pretty well. I'm really happy with how that came out. The rest of it's just like, there's a time for talking about it, for allowing it to be a big deal when that person who it's a big deal to actually gets to express that for themselves. And the rest of the time, it's just don't make it a big deal. Some kids are heavier than others. Some kids are lighter than others. We do lifting activities at camp. If this, this is very niche again, but if this applies to you, if you work at a camp where you do 10-foot wall, kids lift each other over the wall. Look, the reality is that some kids are more well suited to lifting other kids. And if we try to live in this fairy tale where everyone's exactly the same, has the same ability, has this, is the same challenge to lift or be lifted, we're going to set kids up for failure constantly. And they're going to have a bad experience, and that's just going to deepen that embarrassment or whatever when it plays out poorly, because we tried to pretend like everybody's the same and they're not. I had a teacher who had been a student who came to this same camp and did the same activity, and after I ran the activity, she thanked me for how I ran it. I didn't force every kid to do the activity in a certain way. If a kid said, I don't feel comfortable because I don't think my classmates can lift me, I'm not going to try to convince them that their classmates can lift them just for them to be proven right in the most embarrassing possible way. If I feel like they need a little bit of gentle encouragement, like, sure, you don't want to try, I think that you have some classmates who would be really happy to give this a shot and to help you over the wall. But if they don't want to, I'm not forcing them. A bunch of other stuff, I won't go into all the details because I don't remember them. But the teacher thanked me afterwards. We had some conversations that, were along the lines of what I just kind of explained and talked about. Teacher thanked me for all that, and she said, I had a horrible experience when I did this activity as a kid. I was a bigger kid. My classmates tried to lift me up. I couldn't get over. My shirt got pulled up. It was just traumatizing. And not all of that may have been because of this mentality that, about body image or whatever. It may have just been kind of different day and time, different thoughts in general about how we approach these types of activities, about whether every kid needs to try or not in a specific way. So I'm not saying it was 100% related to this. But I am saying that the whole class, including the teacher, had a really good experience. And part of that is about me as an instructor being realistic. And I'm not really stepping in to tell them you can or can't do this, or you should or shouldn't, or because of your size and this kid's size, this is how this should be arranged. No, kids are pretty perceptive to all that. They're pretty aware, intuitive, and they think, yeah, well, he's a little bit heavier, so probably some bigger kids should lift him. Or, the kid who is heavier is like, yeah, I don't feel comfortable with you lifting me. And nobody's, these kids aren't really hung up on it. 99% of the time, the kids are not hung up on that. It's not a big deal unless an adult makes it into a big deal. So it's like, instead of trying to manage that, be like, oh, don't say that. Just let it be. Just let it be. Kids are, for the most part, going to make the right decisions for themselves. And every once in a while, they might miss an opportunity. They might think they can't do it when really they can. And we should be a little bit attentive to that. But, by and large, they're going to make the right decisions for themselves. And even if it was possible for them to do the activity, but they chose not to because of genuine concern about this or that, that's still empowering in a way, because they made a choice and the adult respected that choice. Didn't try to convince them otherwise, didn't try to make it a big deal about that they're not really as heavy as they think they are or something like that. Just said, okay, I hear you don't feel comfortable with this. You don't have to do it. Would you like to help lift on the next, whatever. Keep them involved, keep them engaged, keep them feeling valuable. And without drawing additional attention to whatever the reason was, they feel that they're heavier or whatever, just acknowledging and respecting their decision and saying you hear that they don't feel comfortable and move on. It's not a big deal. Don't make it a big deal. And sometimes we make calls, sometimes I make calls, and I'm moving on from this to canoeing. Canoes work better if one participant is significantly heavier than the other. The activity works better if the heavier person is in the back rather than the front. So rather than letting kids get in a canoe in a way where they're going to struggle the entire time and have a really terrible experience, I'm going to risk the possible minute embarrassment to them of saying, hey, this is really going to work better if you sit in the front, you sit in the back. That's it. Move on. It's not making a big deal about it. It's not that being told, hey, I'd like to have you in the front, you in the back. Go ahead, get in, let's go. That is not embarrassing or traumatizing to a child the way that having a horrible experience and being unable to maneuver your canoe throughout the entire activity block while all your friends are having fun and doing great, that's what's going to traumatize a child. And then if they become aware that's kind of because of the distribution of the heavier and less heavy student in the canoe, then they're going to, be, that's going to be, forced on them, that awareness and the inability to overcome it because now they're stuck in those spots in the canoe. That's going to be, affecting them through the entire experience, instead of like a 5-second little switch around, move on, they go out, they may not have a great experience. Maybe they're not good at canoeing anyways, but they're going to have a better experience than if they were in the vessel in a way that doesn't work well inherently. So, these little things or big things that people feel that they're doing to protect a student's feelings, if it gives that student, if it sets that student up to have a worse experience, it's not really protecting their feelings. They're going to feel incapable, incompetent, embarrassed, frustrated, a whole bunch of things. It's better to just be direct without making a big deal and move on. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you got something out of it. I appreciate it. I'll catch you later.